Well, welcome everybody, and we're so glad that you're here. I'm thrilled to be joined by Eugene Soar, the artistic director of the Crowden School in Berkeley and chamber music director of the Palo Alto Chamber Orchestra, better known as PACO, as well as our very special guests, two members of the Fry Street Quartet, Robert Waters and Anne Francis. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, it's great to have you, and a quick introduction to this remarkable ensemble. The Fry Street Quartet, named after their very first rehearsal space, was formed in 1997 as in quartet residence at the Kane College of the Arts at Utah State University. Over the years, they've performed on stages and festivals around the world, captivating audiences with their depth, energy, and artistry. Among their many honors is the Millennium Grand Prize at the prestigious Fischoff National Chamber Music Competition in 2000. But beyond the accolades, what truly sets them apart is their commitment not only to performance at the highest level, but to education, mentorship, and community. They are inspiring musicians, dedicated teachers, and genuinely wonderful human beings, and we're delighted to have them with us today. We're excited to explore what it really means to live the life of a string quartet, how collaboration works at the highest level, and how performance and education intertwine in your artistic journey. So as you come to the West Coast and hang out with Castillero, hang out with the Palo Alto Chamber Orchestra, and hang out with Crowden, we're excited to hear what it is you have to share with us today. So let's dive in. Eugene, take it away.
Thanks, Scott. Robert and Anne, welcome. I'll start by asking you and the two of you and your colleagues Rebecca and Brad, you've been performing together for decades now and have evolved both musically and personally since the quartet's start in 1997. How has the ensemble chemistry developed over the years between you four, and what keeps your collaboration fresh after so many seasons together?
Wow, what a great question, and a big question, actually. Well, any string quartet, of course, evolves over time, and you're not going to play together for all these years without going through lots of changes, musical, personal, and everything in between. I would say that once Robert joined the quartet, and gosh, Robert, that was how
2012.
Yeah, so yeah, it's been a long time now. We always used to sort of joke that was kind of when the grown-up Fry Street Quartet really started. I think, when you start really young, and when I joined the quartet, gosh, I think I was 22 maybe, or something like that. You're full of all these ideals and all these hopes and dreams, and this shared love for chamber music and for being in a string quartet, which is this incredible gift. But the realities of it, of course, aren't always what you think they're going to be when you're young and aspirational and idealist and everything else. So I will only speak for myself when I say that I've really grown up in the Fry Street Quartet, and feel like by the time Robert came along, I don't know, it was just, we're very, very fortunate to have a really, I would say, highly developed interpersonal relationship as an ensemble. And that's not always easy to find. And it requires, not unlike a marriage, a lot of, really deep listening and understanding. We all know, oh gosh, yeah, you got to be good to each other. You got to be respectful to each other, but to really, really understand each other, that's a real commitment. And I feel really fortunate that my three colleagues in the quartet really do that on such a high level. And day to day, I think we continue to hone that. And of course, that kind of deep listening and understanding then sets the stage for our musical collaboration to really flourish and to constantly be evolving. That's one of the things that has kept me in this ensemble and in this life for all these years, is just, it's always evolving. I am always growing. We are always growing, and what greater gift than to just have that as your job, to be able to just get better and better as an artist, a player, and a human being day after day.
Question again. That was super awkward to hear. I love it. So you're balancing things. So the audience comes in. We know what Beethoven is, right? The audience comes in. We know what Mozart is. But you want to expose them to not just the great canon, but you also want to show them what music is here in the 20th century and all the different potential collaborations that you can have. So how do you balance bringing in these audience with this expectation and also opening their ears to this new world of music that's being created right now?
It's a super exciting part of what we do. We've now commissioned, I don't know, maybe 10 pieces, probably more if you count some of the smaller works that we've done in recent years. And having the chance to be a co-creator of a new piece of music is altogether a different act than recreating something that was written 200 years ago. Uh, the the ability to talk with and work with and ask questions of a live composer, and for that composer to be very interested in what we have to say, not in terms of like, can you actually do this on your instrument, but does this flow from this idea to that idea? Do you feel like this is working, or should we try a few different ways? To be in that position of responsibility and an opportunity to co-create is just super exciting, and we've done it quite a number of times now, and look forward to more. And there's a freshness to that. I think that is also really a beautiful thing to share with audiences. They, of course, have never heard the piece either, and so when had a chance to really invest our time and energy learning, but also working with the composer, and then the kind of the five of us are presenting this new creation to an audience, that almost always we've had a really great response to that, and it's a beautiful counterbalance, I think, to the great canon. I think classical musicians are often unfairly, sometimes, perhaps in other cases, fairly labeled as just, you see the notes on the page and you play, like, there's just, what else are you do? You just do what the composer says, and that's that. And it's not always, that's not the whole truth, of course, but when it really is an opportunity to create something out of nothing, then that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it certainly informs when we learn and play and perform new music, and it also informs what we do on an interpretive level with music that's been around for a long time. And so I think if we were doing only one or only the other, we would be poorer musicians as a result.
Thanks, Robert. Well, I think you kind of partially already answered my next question, but I'll ask it anyway. Maybe I'll tweak it a little bit. When you approach a piece like Beethoven's like quartets, or anything from the canon, as opposed to a newly commissioned work, besides the opportunity to work with the living composer and ask the questions directly, how else might your rehearsal process differ, when preparing a new piece by Gabriela Lena Frank, as opposed to a Mendelssohn quartet?
It's actually interesting you bring this up. We just this morning we were visiting with an advanced level theory class here at Utah State University, and we were playing some Mozart for them. And this exact question came up from one of the students. Well, what's the difference between working with a living composer versus playing this music? And there's not as big a difference as you would think, actually. It still comes down to, of course, the focus of this class was a lot on form. So we started out talking about it through that lens that, we're still looking at how is the music constructed, and how can we take the audience through that construction in a way that's going to help them to understand it. So that's partially form, but also things like, how are we treating the motivic material? And, even in music that on first glance looks extremely thorny and maybe not so easy to find a way in, it's, as Robert said this morning, it's still music. And so there's this commonality that stretches across all these hundreds of years. So of course, certain things are going to challenge us in specific ways. Like we've commissioned multiple composers pretty recently that have asked us to do some pretty challenging extended techniques, and have guided us, but also to a certain degree let us make it our own too, which is its own challenge, right? Sometimes it's easier to have a composer say, I want it exactly like this, do that, great. But we work with all these marvelous composers who are like, well, I like that, try this. Have you tried that? Well, now go make it your own, see what you think works best. And so sometimes that challenges us just on a musical and sort of technical level. Ooh, how do I play with, air in my sound over, the fingerboard close to my left hand or whatever it might be. So we have a lot of fun digging into those challenges too. But in the end, I think the commonality is, once again, just what do we want to communicate to the audience, and how can we make this a really effective experience for them?
Yeah, it sounds like effective experiences is probably one of the main ideas that you're trying to communicate anytime you go on the stage. And when you've commission pieces like Clarice Assad, Laura Kaminsky, integrated themes such as sustainability into projects like the Crossroads Project. How do you choose the composers to commission? Do you reach out to them? Do they reach out to you? Is it collaborative in nature? Are you colleagues and friends? Is it just ideas in the world? I imagine sustainability, that's on our mind as a people. There's certainly plenty of things on our mind in 2026, and artists process those things and collaborations come up. So how do you seek that as the Fry Street Quartet, or do they seek you out? How does that process work?
It's a range, but I would say just like the music world as a whole, and certainly even the chamber music world itself, it's all very small and people know each other, and there's connections of one sort or another with virtually every composer that we've worked with has come to us through some specific connection, whether it was our initial reach out or a suggestion by another composer that we know. Oh, hey, if you're thinking about this, then this person would be really wonderful for that. That's also another one of the things that we value so much in what we do, is there's just beautiful network of friends and colleagues who operate at whatever they're doing, whether composing or performing or managing or presenting or teaching at a really high level. And we're just fortunate to have connections throughout the country and beyond with a lot of folks that believe in what we're doing. And so we've been able to take advantage of that network to find people like Laura Kaminsky, like Gabriela Lena Frank. In fact, the Clarice Assad commission came essentially because the first time we met her, we had been engaged to play the premiere performance of a piece called Pandemonium that she wrote for us, which was a piece for string quartet and chamber orchestra that was premiered by the San Jose Chamber Orchestra. And we came out in 2014, I think it was, back, Anne, or maybe 2013.
13, I think, yeah.
And premiered that piece and got to know her then, and like loved her music and loved working with her. And so it took a few years, but we were able to write a grant and fund the commission, and then had Clarice out, I think, on 2 separate occasions to visit with our students and work with them and to help workshop the piece. So there's these various different routes that come, but it's almost always there's a good and inspiring reason why these pairings have happened for us. And another one of the many things that we celebrate and feel grateful for about what we're able to co-create here.
So you're just a quick follow-up. You're describing kind of a rich tapestry of connections across the country, maybe even internationally, based on wherever these musicians may be. Often I think we feel like the arts are these little lone islands, and we don't always feel that connection beyond wherever we are. One of the fun things here is just connecting Crowden with Castillero and PACO, just showing 3 very different but dynamic organizations. I find that just reaching across and finding ways to connect is maybe the best way to keep the arts engaging with our population. Are you finding similar things, that there's actually quite a bit out there? We just need to find ways to reach out and connect?
100%.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's one of the more, there's a lot to be grateful for when you're in a quartet that is functioning as the Fry Street Quartet does, but that larger network is of inspiration and support and connection.
Right.
It would be hard, I think, for us to do anything close to what we do if we were simply on an island. That's not really how the arts work at its best at all.
Yeah. And, bizarrely enough, even though we were joking earlier about, being on Zoom, right? Sort of the great gift and curse of the pandemic that we all had to kind of learn how to do this, right? But it's really been a gift in that way, not just for us, but for our students too, in getting to work with composers, because we're all a lot more adept at working with folks online. And so we've actually done a tremendous amount of composer workshopping via Zoom. Ourselves as the Fry Street Quartet, but also our students. We have commissioned some chamber music works for our students too over the years. So that's been amazing. And as much as we kind of grumble sometimes about Zoom, that has helped make it feel so much easier to connect. We don't have to fly a composer here. We can be doing this via all this wonderful technology. And that helps tremendously. And it helps our students too to feel like, wow, even though we're in this relatively small town in Utah, we're working with these composers indeed, sometimes internationally and certainly all around the country.
Mm-hmm.
What a gift for those students, not only to work with you, but with such prominent composers, and and to expand their network and our musical community. It's a gift to all of us, really. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Maybe let's dive a little bit more into your Crossroads project. So the Crossroads project, I'm not going to do it justice by trying to describe it. I know it combines music. It's a multidisciplinary project that combines music with science and visual art. But maybe I can ask one of you or both of you to elaborate on that a little bit more, and how the concept originated. And also maybe describe some of your more memorable audience reactions.
Well, I can start with the origin, Robert, and then maybe I'll let you take it from there. We have a wonderful, now a very, very dear friend, and full disclosure, he actually, not long into the starting point of the project, ended up marrying our second violinist, Becky. But we were, before that point, very dear friends with a physicist, Rob Davies, who was here at Utah State University. He had done some postdoctoral work at Oxford and fallen in love with chamber music there. And he would go to these chamber music concerts and felt like being in that space was very meditative for him, and often it would help him to unlock the problems that he was working on in the lab. It gave him this space to think and work through things. So he approached us, and sorry, I should back up and say he had gotten into climate communication. He's a physicist, but this was something that was very interesting to him. And so all of us had seen him give talks at various points here in Logan or in the region about the climate crisis. And so at a certain point, he came to us and said, I've been thinking a lot about all this work I'm doing to try to communicate these issues and this crisis. And I feel like, people are understanding the science that I'm sharing with them, but they're not moved to action. That it's not enough of a visceral sort of punch to say, wow, okay, we got to do something about this. And he had this nascent idea, like, can we somehow collaborate so that we can offer music as a way in to connect to people more viscerally, so that they will have potentially this more direct response, and certainly a more emotional response. And so we just kind of dove in. None of us really knew what exactly it was going to look like, but said, yes, this is a very important issue to us. So let's get started. We tried a few early versions that were a little clunky, felt a little bit more like, okay, the physicist is going to lecture for a while, and then we're going to play some pieces, and we were using existing music at that point. So we played some Shostakovich and didn't really feel right. And so at that point was actually when we were given the recommendation to contact Laura Kaminsky. And here, back to Robert, you were talking earlier about composer connections. A friend said, she's written on ecological themes. You should get in touch with her. And so we emailed her, and Rebecca was on the phone with her literally within, I think, 10 or 15 minutes. And she said, I'm totally in. Now, we had no idea what we exactly were asking her to do other than write a piece of some sort. We didn't know how we were going to pay her, but she said, this is really important to me too, so I just consider me a partner. And so Rob gave her essentially a graph, which was maybe the one and only time this has ever happened to her. But he had an idea for the outline of the program that would kind of take the audience through the wonders of the natural world and sort of conclude with, here's how human systems are working pretty much completely out of sync with the natural world. And she wrote this beautiful quartet called Rising Tide. And from that point, we really started to hone this, what we sometimes refer to as performance science, where, it's not just talk, play, but something that's more integrated. It involves a lot of visuals, visual art, as well as photography. And what we did not expect when we premiered it in the fall of 2012 was that it would go on to have this incredible life beyond just when we did it here at Utah State. And Robert, maybe I'll let you speak about a few of the memorable performances that we've had since then, because at this point we've performed it, I think, almost 70 times.
Yeah, pretty
It's
close to that, I think. All around the country. There were some nascent performances in Brazil as well, and in Mexico. And the audience response pretty much uniformly has been really, really both, well, positive, I would say, although the way that we constructed the performance didn't leave people feeling particularly great. Because it was wrestling with a really, really different suite of issues. It was more actually than just about climate change and the climate crisis, but around global sustainability issues such as biodiversity loss, ocean acidification, and things like that. It's just a much broader topic. And one of the things that was clear to us at the beginning of the project was that we wanted to create something that would really, especially at the time when this came out, in 2012, there was still plenty of people who were like, yeah, well, maybe it's a problem, but it's probably being exaggerated. And there was plenty of skeptics, both where we live and in other places as well. And so we really wanted to kind of shake people and not let them off the hook as so many documentaries do of one sort of disturbing topic or another. We've all kind of seen the documentary that the first 2/3 is here's this big problem and it's causing all these terrible consequences, and then the last third is like, oh, but then there's these wonderful people who are doing all these wonderful things to help alleviate the problem, and you're sort of left with like, oh, well, it's being handled somehow. And we did not want to do that, and so we crafted something that we did our best to try and give people at least some sense that yes, there are things that are happening that are good, and there are ways that you can plug into to help support this effort and that effort to make this at least start to lean in the right direction. But the scale of the issue that we're looking at, all the suite of issues that we bring up in the Crossroads Project are so enormous, and we're so close to the hairy edge that it really left a lot of people shocked. And what we did virtually for every single performances that we had, as soon as we were done, we put our instruments away, came right back on stage, and for anyone who was interested, we would stick around and talk about the project as a whole, the topic as a whole, and people would ask questions. And there was a lot of people who were stunned and deeply disturbed and wanted answers, like, what do we do? What's now? What's next? How do we? And so we would sort of wrestle with those questions together because we're all asking the same questions. And it was a really kind of singular experience. Almost any time we would play a quartet concert, we'd finish, and even if we would end with a very, very dark piece, like maybe we would end a concert with Bartók's Sixth Quartet, which is incredibly tragic. We would still end the concert feeling like, yay, we had this wonderful opportunity to communicate something on a real deep emotional level to our audience, and we would celebrate that. And finishing a Crossroads performance was not that. It was kind of reaching very deeply into something that affects every single human and creature on this planet, and talking about this terrible, terrible, and extremely dangerous situation that we find ourselves in. And so the audience response was powerful, and at sometimes challenging, but I think at every turn, it was something that we were really grateful to be a part of, to, as artists, be able to lend our skills and our voices towards something that really is so critical to humanity and what's happening on this planet.
Well, so the way I manage my own personal crossroads, because you can certainly read a lot of headlines and feel, well, the way everyone feels at the end of seemingly those performances, which is a little bit lost and a little bit out of hope and feeling that it's overwhelming, is that I get to teach all day, and I mostly teach age 9 to 17. And when you're in a classroom with 9 to 17-year-olds, all you see is possibility and hope. And you're coming out to the West Coast. And my hope in making an impact is every day trying to widen the pathways of these young people to think critically and to find a way to make a positive impact in their world and their community. I happen to teach those ideas through the world of music because I think it lends itself so comfortably and easily to ways of collaborating and enjoying the process at the same time. And so when you're out here and you're working with college students, mostly in Utah State, and I'm sure you're working with all sorts of ages. And of course, you work with other professionals and you get to see a whole gamut of reactions to music and different places where we're all learning. What's it like for you when you do work with the younger population? Does it make you revisit pieces in a fresh way, in a new way, seeing them try to tackle some of these masterworks? What does it feel like when you do leave that incredibly powerful performance stage and enter a classroom filled with kids who are just looking up to you and excited to play music?
Well, it's one of our greatest joys, honestly. I mean, we too see the possibility. It's so joyful, and a reminder, right, that we're all starting from the same place, and I think young people have such an open mind towards kind of everything. Well, I don't know. I'm thinking about my 13-year-old at home now and thinking, well, maybe he's not always so open with me, but in general, so when they're working on ideas, there's this sense of kind of fearlessness, and an openness to new ideas, and the ideas of, chamber music, of course, having such an emphasis on great communication. It's the same in a chamber orchestra setting, right? So, I mean, I think we get really energized by it and excited by it. Younger folks generally don't have the same kind of barriers that maybe some of our college kids might have, right? The fear of making mistakes or fear of looking foolish or not knowing something, or even just being open-minded to, hearing a contemporary piece, for example. So I think it's something that we all get really excited about. And it really is, I mean, we could not be doing what we do for our job without building these kinds of minds and souls for the future. I mean, and it's a constant process. We can't just bank on having people interested in listening to this unless we're growing people who are interested in listening to this.
Yeah, I would just add that it's one of the things that's so fun every single time is to see how excited young people are by the music and also by how they bond together through the music. It's a very particular kind of bond when they've got a project that is really theirs. No one's going to be on stage helping them kind of make their way through. They got to figure it out themselves. And so teaching them what that is and how to connect to each other in an ever more meaningful and deep way, and then seeing the results of that and seeing how excited they are to be bonded in that way to each other, even if it's, just a 1 week or a 10-day festival or something like that. We can see that they've been changed by that experience, and that's fuel for us for everything else that we do is seeing just the beauty in that.
Or that again dovetails with a little bit with my next question, but I think I'm going to try to tweak this question too. A big part of playing in a quartet and having a residency and whether it's back home in Utah or coming to the West Coast for a week, is giving master classes and having coaching sessions with young and actually adult chamber groups, because that's going to be part of the residency at Crowden next week. Or I guess I should say this week. This is not pre-recorded. This week at Crowden. So, master classes often reveal processes in a very open way. And I just want to ask you, what are some of the most valuable lessons that you try to impart on young and older chamber musicians? That might be a slightly different answer for each. I don't know. And what are some of the most valuable things that you've gained yourselves from the students in your coachings and whether they're private or public coachings?
I'd say one of the themes that comes up most often in both private and public classes, maybe even more so in masterclass situations, is the idea that if you're trying to communicate a particular emotion or a particular character, that you've got to exaggerate it way, way more than you think in order for people in the audience to have even a chance at guessing what it is that you're trying to say. That it's just it comes up over and over and over again because it really does create or it takes quite a bit of energy and more energy than most people think. And it's also a reminder to us every time that we rehearse that, when we think that we're doing something, it's likely that we need to do more of it for it to be truly effective. And
I'm gonna excerpt that and play it on loop for my students. Just
it's gonna be with a crescendo. Just keep turning the volume up.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the job of every teacher, right? Every music teacher is to get more, get more character, more sound, more investment on every level. And in a public setting, it's in some ways easier to do that because you can turn to the audience and say, was that too much? Was that enough? And instantly the audience says, no, more. And so their own colleagues often are saying, yeah, no, that's not enough. And eventually, if you hear that message enough, it starts to sink in, and you start to figure out how it is that you're going to generate that energy between the four of you, or however many of you are creating that. And so that's a fun thing, and it's so universal and applies to absolutely everyone who picks up an instrument at any point.
Yeah. And the other big universal thing that we come back to a lot in all kinds of ages and all kinds of settings is when you're collaborating together, you have to be really clear on what your goals are, your shared goals. And that works on every level, from just like, okay, what are we going to do in this next half an hour part of our rehearsal, to what are we going to do in this bar of music, to what are our goals for our ensemble 5 and 10 years from now. If you're really clear on what your shared goals are, it eliminates conflict, first of all, like 99% of the time, because it takes it out of the, oh, well, I like my idea better than yours. It's not about anybody's idea. It's about, what are we looking to do? What is our goal here? And so we find that we come back to that a lot, and that young professional groups, amateurs, even just kids having their first chamber music experience. What we do as musicians, period, is really vulnerable. And so a lot of times people playing in groups together, there's a vulnerability that can be a little scary, and coming back to the goals really lessens that sense of, I don't want to call it fear, but maybe sometimes it is that, but that potential for feeling really vulnerable. So we talk about that a lot too.
Yeah, these are all great. The idea of vulnerability, I think, is really important, because I think we put up a lot of walls to avoid conversations that are challenging. And again, if you can do it in small doses and healthy ways, it develops that muscle so that you're reaching out to colleagues when things are challenging, or neighbors when things are challenging, or family members when things are challenging. Like, these are things that we need to keep working on as a society, and trying to do that in a performance element I think it is really scary for a lot of these students, because even though you said sometimes the younger folks are really open, they feel like, well, I'm in Crowden, I should know things. Oh, I'm in senior PACO, I should know things. I'm like, you're 15 years old. You're good. Like, you're on a great track. We're really proud of you. Let's just keep pushing and seeing what we can do on this pathway, and be open to feedback and keep working hard. For as teaching in public schools, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was building future listeners and people that value the arts and appreciate the arts. And that's one of the things that I do. And I've been at Castillero for 20 years, and it's something that I've hoped to do, is to just make sure that music is still alive in our world. And with the Cambrian Symphony, we have, free concerts for folks that don't have access. With your residency with the Fry Street Quartet, I imagine there's some feeling on your shoulders of, how can we utilize this vehicle to give access to open people's minds to experiences. Quite clearly, the Crossroads Project lend itself to a really big discussion that way. How do you feel that you've done this with audience engagement, with audience development? Any young string quartet, they might not be realizing that they're not just learning Beethoven, but they're really helping an audience grow in this incredible world that we live in every day.
Yeah, makes me think of the Fry, in the early days of the Fry Street Quartet, before I joined, well before I joined actually. The quartet spent 3 years in North Carolina as part of the rural residency program, really creating a connection to a community in all kinds of different ways that was quite profound. And I wonder if you want to just speak to that a little bit, because every time I hear about it, it's just really inspiring to me.
Yeah, and I do think it really shaped a lot of our philosophy as a quartet, and doing exactly what you described so beautifully, Scott, with just really placing a premium on connecting to community. So during our time in North Carolina, the Rural Residency Program was sponsored by Chamber of Music America and the NEA, and sadly the program is no longer running. But the notion was to place an ensemble in a relatively rural area with the simple mandate of making a difference in the community, and really kind of proving why your art form is relevant. So during our time in Hickory, North Carolina, which is in the beautiful foothills area, you know that's exactly what we did. We sometimes refer to it as Peace Corps for the string quartet, learning not only how to connect with children, because we did a lot of school concerts, from literally like rug concerts, they called them, preschool aged kids, 3, 4, 5 years old, all the way up through high school, and then civic organizations of all types, and there are a lot of those in the South. So we played for every conceivable club you could imagine: the Newcomers Club, the Bakers Club, the Knitters Club, you name it. But it was incredible, because what we realized very quickly was that, first of all, you have to learn how to connect to people, not just through your playing, but also you have to connect with them on a personal level. So understanding how to talk to all different kinds of audiences. We really had to learn how to do that really effectively, and we had to learn how to do it quickly. And in addition to that, just the notion that, for an audience who maybe, thinks, I don't know anything about classical music, this doesn't apply to me, or I'm not going to like this, you really have to step it up in your playing too. And that was something that I think, none of us maybe quite realized right at first, that the quality of the playing really matters no matter who you're playing for. And this idea that you really have to bring your best to any performance, that was driven home again and again and again, because people could tell, and kids could tell, if you don't really sell this music, forgive the term, they're not going to have the same kind of experience. And so that was really, really a hugely important part of what we learned. But also now it's in our DNA as a string quartet. I think the notion of like going somewhere and playing and not having some sense of connection to the place where we're playing. And, sometimes that still happens. Maybe we're hired to play a concert somewhere and maybe there isn't much outreach, if any, involved. And, maybe that just means connecting with people that you talk to after the concert, or at a reception. But it's why I think we do tend to be more drawn to places where we're doing exactly what we're going to do with your 3 organizations. We're going to actually have some sustained connection and be in a place long enough that we really feel like we can deeply connect with people, and we hope make some sort of a difference in their lives, musical or otherwise.
I think there's absolute guarantee of that. Everyone's excited that you're coming out, and the way you talk about music and how the connection to it, it's fundamental to all 3 of these organizations. These are groups that really care about the people that are involved, and we're excited to share it. That is for sure. Looking forward, so the role of teaching versus performing, I don't think of it as an either or. I think I did a lecture at the conservatory about if you don't perform, you teach, or something like that. And it was a strange way for the conservatory to phrase the lecture. But they brought me in because I was in the public schools for 20 years, right? And I do remember thinking at the conservatory when I was a grad student, looking at all the freshmen, and they were thinking to themselves, I'm going to be a soloist. And, if I'm not going to be a soloist, I'll do a chamber quartet and that'll be great. And if that doesn't work out, I'll just win a job with SF Symphony or Boston or something like that. And that was kind of their mindset. And then those are the 3 options, and education didn't come part of that. But really, if you're an effective communicator and you're working in a quartet, I think teaching and learning and growing is constant. You mentioned at the very beginning of the interview is that you're constantly growing, and growing doesn't mean kindergarten through 12th grade. It doesn't mean my undergraduate degree, my master's degree. And sort of a personal experience, when I was 12, I thought I was pretty good at everything. And then by the end of high school, I was like, I'm okay, but I should practice more. And then by the end of my undergrad, I'm like, I have to get my master's before I bring my cello out in public. And then by the end of my master's, I'd gotten old enough to where I wasn't as stuck in my head. And it was like, I'm so glad I have the rest of my life to learn. And I think that's something that happens a lot. And we think about teaching as performing as separate, but really it's constant, and I'm assuming you feel very similarly. But as performers who also, you teach full time, how do you see the interplay between performance and pedagogy in your artistic development and that of all your students?
Yeah, they are inseparable.
Yeah.
It's very clear to all four of us that if we were only doing one or the other, then neither would be nearly as good. So if we were just teaching and not performing, the teaching would be not as effective. If we were only performing and not teaching, our performing would be less effective. They really do feed off of each other. And the moment that I started teaching really consistently and seriously, well over 20 years ago, I started to question all kinds of things about my own playing that had never occurred to me to question before. Why do I do things this way? And then the more I would think about it when trying to explain to somebody else what the best way to do it, I would realize, well, it's really dumb what I do. And maybe I should think of a better way. And then I would, and then that would improve my playing as well as my teaching. And it continues to happen in some fashion or another. The lessons that we give to our students so often are exactly the same things that we should be telling ourselves. And it's just borne out, especially since we work together as a quartet. We see each other virtually every day to rehearse, and there's inevitably stories of one lesson or coaching or another come up about something funny that happened or something really effective that happened, and just reinforcing these same notions that we seem to need to hear regularly, because otherwise we'll just forget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and Moments Transformation, Eugene, you guys have all known each other for a while, and I'm in my 40s now. When we first met, Robert, I was, I guess, in my 20s, and I learned a lot just by, observing how you were teaching and how gracious you were. But Eugene, looking across careers, you want to take this one and think about, this giant arc of now that we've spent some time on this planet?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I not only do you teach, but I know that like us, a big sort of the vessel for us pedagogically is chamber music, right? Is this idea of collaborative music. And I know for me, at least, my sort of, as I've evolved as a teacher and performer, I can trace back to the early days of my career, or as a student, where I just thought chamber music was just kind of a fun thing I did, and how that is sort of gradually evolved into not only the best part of my life, but really informs so many of my values outside of music, right? So chamber music for me, at least, is sort of morphed from a fun thing to do to like how I actually live my life. And I can also trace back across my career, like, certain moments where I could feel that evolution, really tangibly, kind of switch a little bit and shift. And I guess that's my question to you is for each of you, looking back across your careers. You kind of mentioned a couple of things like the Royal Residency and the Crossroads Project, of course. But are there specific performances or lessons or collaborations or projects that have sort of fundamentally changed how you think about chamber music?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Maybe not fundamentally changed, but more like just amplified, sort of amplified the things that, I sort of kind of knew or thought I knew, but it's just been deepened. Because we have been lucky enough to, continue to learn not only from each other, and that would be the only thing I'd add to what you were talking about earlier, Robert, about, kind of how the teaching and the quartet life kind of works together, right? We're learning from our students all the time, but we're also learning from each other. But in addition, we've had the chance, of course, to work with all these great composers, but also collaborate with all of these great mentors. We've had a chance to work with a lot of our major mentors over the years, in performance, and also having them here, to teach, to work with our students for residencies. And so I think once you embark on the chamber music life, and then, get the opportunity to again work with a mentor who is really important to you. So I'll just speak for myself personally. Paul Katz, of course, Cleveland Quartet cellist, was my mentor in graduate school. And, that quartet was the quartet I grew up listening to. And so he's been here, 3 or 4 times now at Utah State. And it's just been so incredibly gratifying. And I have continued to just learn so much more from him as now I've had the time in a string quartet myself. And now I'm seeing it from the other side, and I'm seeing the teaching from the other side. And so just, I would say a deeper, much deeper amplification of a lot of the sort of core values that I guess I kind of grew up in. They've just cemented more and more.
I honestly would struggle to name 1 or 2 or even 3 particular moments or people that were specifically shaping me more than the others, and the only explanation for that is my gratitude for the unbelievable tapestry and just sheer number of great musicians that I've had the chance to work with, and I'm sure it's the case for all of us in the quartet. Since the time I went away to a 7-week music camp called Kinhaven at the age of 13, and every summer from then until my mid-20s, I was at a summer festival of one sort or another, and just hundreds and hundreds of great, incredibly engaging and inspiring faculty members from just summer festivals alone. And then, of course, undergraduate and then graduate. And then I went to a third institution after graduate school for a year, and just soaking in absolutely everything I possibly could. And it happens daily that I remember one thing that some coach told me literally 30 or 35 years ago, about like a particular, way to think about how to hold the bow, or a particular way to think about phrasing, or a particular, it's all kind of bouncing around up here, sometimes not on the level of recall that I want, but it's in there somewhere, and and it's just an inexorable part of who I am as a musician. And without that vast wealth of experience, I simply could not possibly be anywhere close to the musician, whatever that is today. It's large part because of that giant well of experience, and it's so I'm grateful for that. And it's one of the things that we try to communicate to our students, is how important it is to create that for yourselves. And that's not always easy for younger people to see that if they've got a great teacher and a great orchestra that they play in, then because what else do they need? And it turns out the more the merrier. It's impossible to oversaturate oneself with just the number of great mentors and colleagues too. I mean, Anne and I, many decades ago, knew each other when we were teenagers at a festival. That was how we first actually met, and we weren't very, very close. The age difference was 4-ish years or something like that. And so when I was maybe 16 and you were 12, we were kind of in our own social circles, but we certainly remembered each other. And so when it came time for the Fry Street Quartet to look for a first violinist and me to look for a job, that was a point of connection. So this kind of the rich tapestry of students and friends and colleagues growing up through the years is also paying dividends in all kinds of ways. That is impossible to know when you are a teenager, what that's going to look like 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road.
I love that. I love that we're really all part of the same ecosystem, right? I mean, we're I learned so much every time, the Fry Street comes into town, or I've had the chance to collaborate with Robert on other occasions too. I learned so much just from observing and from sitting in a quartet for just 2 rehearsals and a concert. It's there's just so much that I can just then pass forward and share, and I love that then turns on a new generation of musicians who will pass it forward, and I just love that we're all part of that sort of continuum. That's really, really one of the great gifts of playing chamber music.
Well, and so here we are. We're about to head into a week where we get to do a lot of chamber music together. You'll get to see our most adorable at 8 and 9 years old, and you get to play for them and then sit side by side. And they're going to be, they're excited to play with you, all the way up to our seniors who are thinking about what's going to happen next in their chapters. So you get to see the whole gamut at PACO. You get to see an even wider gamut at Crowden, and then at Castillero, you get to see kids who are just starting their journey, but they're in those middle school years, and you'll meet about 300 or so students there, and there'll be lots of energy. And if they knock into you, it's not intentional. They're just 12 and they grew 6 inches the day before. So I'll be there to protect you and your instruments. And we're just really excited for you to be here. It's been a wonderful opportunity to talk to you for the hour. I just wanted to thank Fry Street Quartet for spending time with us. We're honored, and we're hoping that you feel welcomed when you're here. And we hope that you can take some of PACO and Crowden and Castillero back with you. And we're certainly be taking the energy from you into our organizations. I want to say thank you to Eugene, because this wouldn't work if I hadn't stumbled into the Brahms Sextet 20 years ago at PACO Camp and started this collaboration and journey and all that he's done for me and for Crowden. Got to thank all these boards, because they have to listen to our vision and then they support those visions. So we have to keep finding dynamic and interesting ways to bring music to as many people as possible. This is something we have to fight for. We got to fight for access. We got to fight for equity and allowing everybody from every corner of our world to have access to these beautiful things that we never take for granted, but we get to experience so fully and every day. This week is more than music. It's about collaboration, curiosity, mentorship, community. It's about showing our students and the world what's possible when we truly listen to one another, and we work together, support one another, create together. We create opportunities for everybody. And I think in a world that sometimes thinks a little bit too small, we can show the world how to think big again. So here's to a great week of collaboration, showing the world how to play well with others. And I love to always close everything with this, and that is, together we are better. So thank you very much to Robert and Ann. Thank you, Eugene. Excited for a really great collaboration with the Fry Street Quartet.
Pretty excited. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.